like to start with your full name, please.
Paul Russell Bottoms.
And how do you spell your last name?
Bottoms.
And where and when were you born?
I was born in Newark, Arkansas in 1921.
What day and what month?
12/12/21.
And where in Arkansas did you say you were?
Newark, Arkansas.
That's Newark.
Yeah.
Is that one word or two?
No, just like Newark, New Jersey.
Okay. All right. 12/12/21.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay. And which branch of the military did you serve with during World War II?
I was in the Army.
Okay. And which units were you attached to in the Army?
I was attached to the 90th Infantry.
And what was your job?
I was a machine loader on a half track.
And what years did you serve from and until?
In the Army, I was drafted, I think, in
Is it 43 or 44?
I think 43. And I got out of the Army, I think it was in sometime, sometime. It was just before Christmas of 46.
And what was the highest rank that you attained?
I was just a PFC in the Army. Yeah.
And did you receive any medals or awards for your service?
I received the Bronze Star.
So let's talk a little bit about your childhood growing up in Arkansas. What was your childhood like?
Well, it was just a normal, I guess, I was just a normal farm boy. I grew up on a farm. I worked farm life. I guess that's about.
What kind of farm did you grow up on?
Well, we raised cotton, corn. That was the main thing.
Was your father in charge of operations?
Yes, yes.
And did you have siblings?
No, later on in life, yes. Yeah.
Do you have brothers, sisters?
Oh, yeah. I had one sister. Yeah.
She's 2 years older.
She was about 18 months older than me.
And your mother, would she help around the farm as well? Or?
No, she was just.
Take care of the house? And you guys?
Yeah.
And what age were you when you first started helping out on the farm?
Oh, probably 15.
And what were your responsibilities?
Just doing whatever my dad told me to do.
Well, what did he tell you to do? What were some of the things that he had to do?
Well, we farmed with mules at the time because back then tractors were very few. So I done with plows, if you know what I'm talking about, and anything that I was big enough to do, I guess.
So what were some of the things you would do for fun growing up?
Now, you know, that's,
Smoke grapevines.
boy, that's reaching way back, yeah. Oh, we did. There was a Doty Creek pretty close to where we lived, and
Went to the movie.
the boys and all, we'd gather at Doty Creek and swim, have fun, I guess.
You went to the movies a lot.
Yeah.
And you go to the movies in the
This little town that I was raised in Newark, Arkansas, was if I remember right, as you're going into town, 913, I believe.
That was the population.
That was the population. So there wasn't much fun around there.
Couldn't get away with much.
You didn't get away with nothing. Everybody knew everything. Yep.
So besides helping out on the family farm, did you have any jobs growing up aside from that?
No,
job was to go to school.
not until after I quit school in 10th grade.
And why did you quit school?
Well, now it was. I've always said I wish my dad would have used his number 9 right foot right in my rear end for quitting. But when the last year I was in school, we had a history teacher, and she would get upset if one of the kids got out of line. She'd get all upset. And so I told my dad, I said, if they move her into the next grade, I'm going to quit because I can't take her. And they moved her. And I told my dad, I said, hey, I'm going to quit school because I just can't take that woman. And he said, okay.
Because he could have used your help on the farm more.
Yeah. So I wish it, as the years went on by, the education, I found out that I should have went on to school. But it's kind of hard to look back and say, what if? You know?
So growing up during the Great Depression, did you guys suffer any hardships? Did you
Oh, yes.
talk about that?
Well, my dad was, he was working railroad work. And when that depression come on, he found a job on the farm. So that's when we moved to the farm. But he was working mostly railroad up until about, I guess, about my 15th year or something like that. So that's just about.
Do you guys have enough food, have enough clothing, that sort of stuff?
Yeah. It was tight. It was tight, but.
probably going through it at the time, you didn't have much of a reference point as to,
No.
but I guess looking back now, modern day times compared to what you
Mm-hmm.
grew up.
Oh yeah. I've looked back and I've thought about my dad. How in the world did he do it? You know, because I couldn't see myself going through something like that. You know. But when I went into the military, I just said to myself, I'm going to go all the way, because that retirement at the end, you got to work for it. So military retirement is not all that big, but it with other things that I worked at, it worked out good.
So after you quit school, what were you doing between that point and then when you were drafted? It looks like there was a few years in between there. Did you continue working on the farm, or did you have other jobs that you picked up?
No, I worked on the farm. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So do you remember where you were when Pearl Harbor got hit?
Yes.
Can you tell me about that?
That was on a Sunday. And I told my mom and dad, I said, I think I'll go to the movies. And when I got out of the movies and I came home, my mom and dad was out on the front porch. And my dad said, did you hear about Japan? I said, what? He said, Japan hit Hawaii bad. So that wasn't long until I was drafted.
You remember how you reacted? What thoughts ran through your head once you learned that?
No, I guess I probably thought, here I'll be drafted into the Army before long, you know. And it wasn't long until I was drafted into the Army. Yeah.
Did you have any thoughts of joining up before you got drafted?
Yes, my cousin went into the Marine Corps, and he asked me. He said, "Why don't you and I just go to Little Rock and join the Marine Corps?" I said, "Well, now that sounds like a pretty good idea." So we didn't have much money or anything like that, so him and I hitchhiked to Little Rock, which is about 100 miles, something like that. And we went through all the process of fill out papers for the Marine Corps and all. And they both gave us a physical and all that. So after the physical, it become lunchtime. So they told us what restaurant to go to and tell them what the situation is. And he said, have dinner on us. And so we did. And when we got back to the Marine Corps office or wherever, and they told him he was 15 pounds overweight. That was all was wrong with him. So they said, we are going to accept you. We'll take that 15 pounds off before you know what's going on. And me, that's when I found out that I was weak. Just enough that I couldn't join the Marine Corps. So I would just come on home, and I told my dad, he said, well, why don't you join the, well, it was the Army Air Force at the time. He said, why don't you join the Army Air Force or join the Army or join the Navy? He said, don't go into the Army. You don't know where you're going to go or what you're going to be doing, you know. And I said, no. I tried to join the Army, and the Marine Corps, and my right eye was weak. So I said, I'll just let them draft me. So it wasn't long until that's what they did.
Were you discouraged that you weren't able to join the Marines?
Yeah, it kind of discouraged me, you know. Because I had no idea my right eye was weak, you know. And
But still good enough for the Army.
so it's like the old saying, they bend over and they can look into your mouth and into your rear end and don't see no blockage, and they take it.
So, do you remember the day that you received your draft notice?
Yeah.
You remember receiving that letter? And
Greetings and salutations.
how did you feel?
Well, I knew he was coming, you know, and I told my dad, I said, it's coming. And he said, well, and he, after I got my basic training and all, and they gave us a few days leave, and I went home, and he took me to the bus station just before I went overseas. And I told my dad, I said, I'm not going unless I got a round trip ticket. So when I got home, I told him, I said, didn't even get a scratch. So somebody was looking after me.
So where did you go for your basic?
I was in Camp Hewland, Texas.
Anything memorable from your experiences there?
No, it was just plain old basic training. Yeah.
And where did you go from there?
We went to Fort Dix. That's just out of Indianapolis, and I think that's where we joined the bigger outfits, you know. And we didn't know that the 90th Infantry had been formed in Texas, and so we all joined My outfit was joined the 9th Division. We went over on the Queen Mary.
So at Fort Dix, did you go for any specialized training, or
No,
what occurred there?
just um, yeah, we that's Fort Dix, New Jersey is when we formed the outfit that I was in all the way through.
So is that where you were assigned as a machine gunner on the half tracks, or?
Hmm. Yeah. See, we uh, it's kind of hard for me to explain anything anymore. Um, we formed a anti-aircraft artillery unit battalion. We had 40 millimeters and the 50 caliber machine guns, and we were we gave a battalion of 105 howitzer, if you know what I'm talking about. We gave them ground and air support. When they moved, they'd move at night. We'd also move along with them. And we'd set up in a circle around them. And we would give them air and ground support. Yeah.
So you guys set sail on the Queen Mary, you said.
Mm-hmm.
And do you remember that journey across the Atlantic Ocean?
Well, the Queen Mary was a luxury ship, and they took all the beds and everything out and put bunks along the side that fold up, you know, and they drained the inside pools and made mess halls. And when we loaded the Queen Mary, they said that we went down the coast from New York to about Maryland, and then turn and head for Scotland. We that was in wartime when there was subs out there, and they said that now I talked to different ones on the ship, ship's company, and they said whenever we hit Maryland and we turned left and head for Scotland, they said they pushed the throttle wide open and they zigzag all the way, and the ship was just a constant roll. I think it took 7 days. I believe that's what they said.
And you guys arrived in Scotland?
Mm-hmm. Glasgow, Scotland. Mm.
What were your first impressions landing in Scotland and being in a foreign land?
It was different.
Yeah.
Everybody's different. Everybody talked different. That's about all I can. Then we went from Scotland down into England, and we stopped in Oakhampton. This was before we went from England over to France. We were in Oakhampton, England. And the base wasn't all that big. And a lot of the people out in town took so many in, whatever they could. And I was staying with this guy and his wife, and I think they had a couple of little ones. And I'd go down at night and talk to them, you know, just keep from being lonely, you know. And the last night I was there, he asked me, he said, I told him, I said, I got orders, I got to go to the base in the morning, and I said, we're moving. He said, where are you going to? And they'd always told us, you don't tell nobody movements if you know. I said, I have no idea. I said, they don't tell us nothing. He laughed and he said, well, he said, I just going to see if you would say anything. He said, I know where you're going. He said, I work for the railroad. He said, I work for the department that schedules the move for military. He said, I just want to know and see if you'd say anything.
So he already knew the answer.
I said, I didn't know nothing, so how could I?
He was just testing you a bit.
Yeah, he was just, as the old saying, he was just testing the waters.
But the correct answer would be France, correct?
Yeah, we moved up into and done some aerial gunnery, and then from there we went over.
Now I understand that parts of your unit arrived on the actual D-Day invasion, and the majority of the rest of the unit came a few days later.
Yeah, part of the outfit went ashore on June the 6th. But that was the part that was, I guess what we would say, boots on the ground.
Yep.
The riflemen. But the unit I was in was mechanized. And so we went, we hit the beach on June 8th.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but you guys landed on Utah Beach?
Mm-hmm. Utah Beach.
And this was just 2 days after the initial invasion.
Mm-hmm.
So do you remember any of the sights that you saw?
Yeah, now this little thing that I'm going to tell you might have something to do with me not remembering. The outfit that I was in was TO. It was a Texas and supposed back earlier. It was Texas and Oklahoma, the 90th, and so it had an O and a T. Right. And so when we got landed, everything was real quiet. And so I was just wandering out a little bit, not getting too far out. And I found a helmet. And that helmet had that TO right up here.
Mm-hmm.
And I picked the helmet up, just looking at it. And I turned it around to where I could see that TO. And it had a bullet hole right through that TO. And I remember what I said. I looked at it and I said, oh my God, what in the world have I got myself into? And I threw it down. And I went back over to where the rest of the guys were.
Reality kind of sunk in at that point?
Oh, yeah. The reality, seeing that helmet, and I had one on, exactly the same thing, and had a TO up here.
You figured that very easily.
And I thought, gee, man, Christmas. Well, what it was is a sniper.
Sure.
Because you never knew where those snipers were. They might just have you in the crosshairs any time.
Is there anything else that you remember your first day, first few hours?
No, I think that's about, yeah. And then we just, they had just pushed us over to the side, trying to get everything organized,
Mm-hmm.
And we were there for a couple of days, and we got orders to move out.
Tell him what you told me about France and how the Germans could have won the war. Tell him what you thought how the Germans could have won the war.
Oh, it was just a joke, I told him, I said, the Germans could have won the war without even firing a shot. All they'd have to do was poison the wine cellars and retreat.
If they was drinking quite, the women were running out and giving.
Oh, they had some mighty fine wine cellars.
In France, yeah, I'm sure.
Oh yes, they did.
He said they all would have been too drunk to worry
Yeah.
about the war. He told me a couple of stories about being in the foxhole. How you were just telling me this morning. Am I screwing you up there?
No.
He was talking about how they would put their sleeping bags up underneath like the tank things, and put their heads up underneath, and they would take what do you call it, some type of a nail, and nail the sleeping bag at the feet
Mm-hmm.
to the ground like a tent peg, so that if they had to come out of it real fast, the sleeping bag would stay. But he said it was pretty cold.
Well, that was in the winter time when
A few months later.
it was, yeah.
He went out of the Army where my daughter did her basic at
Oh,
Fort
okay.
Leonard Wood.
That's where he was discharged.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty crazy. What a coincidence for her to end up there.
So you
Same
guys,
auditorium.
so you guys were involved in some pretty heavy fighting those first few weeks and months.
Yeah. Well, our outfit was we, like I say, gave ground and aerial support for this battalion of 105 Hauser. And when they patrolled from the Germans, when they would come in and try to capture or whatever, then we would have to protect them because they all they had was a rifle and that Hauser, and there was a few times when they got attacked by ground force. Instead of having their Hauser elevated so you can fire way down, they lowered it right down on the ground and fired right straight into them. And we'd have attacked by the Luftwaffe. When they start firing, a lot of times they'd come in and try to silence them, and we'd have to come alive, and that's the only time we would fire is whenever we were planes. One time I remember all of a sudden everything was just as quiet as could be, and all of a sudden the 90s, those 90 millimeter, or they could reach way up and fire. And there was 3 planes that came from over the German lines, come over, and they were so high that we could just barely see them. We didn't know what they were. And we had been given orders, if anybody does a hostile act, you shoot and ask questions later. So this 3 came over, and the 90s were after them. So they went into a no dive to get out of the range of the 90s. And they didn't know it, but they were flying right down our throat. And they got in range, so we cut loose on them. And we brought one of them down. We shot one of them down. 2 of them got away. Come to find out, they were P-51s. And they see the reason you just go ahead and fire and ask questions later, because our planes were captured. We captured theirs, and we used theirs, and they used ours. So we didn't know.
Could be your plane, but
Yeah. So our commanding officer, they brought him up on the long green carpet, and I wouldn't know why. So he just told him, he said, hey, they committed hostile act. Well, he said, they said, well, we really don't know why they didn't identify themselves. But they were P-51s. They had no guns or anything like that. They had cameras. They had been over German lines taking pictures, and they were coming back. And the 90s officers, they tried to get him to identify themselves, and they didn't. They wouldn't. They didn't know why. But that was one in particular thing that we run onto things like that different, you know.
So how many guns, how many of the 105s were you guys protecting?
Well, out of the battalion of 105s, we were assigned to one company, and I think there were about 6 or 7 guns.
And aside from half tracks, were there tanks or any other type of armored vehicle that would protect them as well, or was it?
No, just us.
And about how many half tracks would there be?
Oh, they. You know, I've tried to refresh my memory on that. I think there was 4 40mm guns and 4 half tracks per company. And that was just a company, and we had several.
So when was the first time that you had encountered any of the enemy? Was it soon after you landed in France?
Yeah.
Do you remember that day? And
Oh no, I couldn't. Now those things like that I don't remember. No. Now that book there is pretty well. I've read it a couple of 3 times, and it's Hill 122 was our first real battle. Now Hill 122 was a hill. I can't remember exactly how far it was from the beach, but that hill was high enough that the Germans, they built it up on top, and they could had a
360 view of
yeah,
everything.
yeah, and it was the book says that they had their top troops protecting that hill, and two or 3 times they'd take us back to shower ever so often. And I just happened to be back there whenever some of the infantry was back there, and I was talking to one of them. I asked him, I said, how many, as you guys had a big turnover in troops. He said, they said that we have had about 110 replacement. That's, they killed off and replacement. And I've read that book there, and that Hill 122 was one of the worst ones.
Yeah, I understand that the division suffered about 5,000 casualties in total.
Oh, it tells in the back of the book how many.
Yeah, they said it was one of the highest casualty rates of World War II.
Mm-hmm.
But you guys ended up taking the hill.
Oh yeah, the infantry did. Yeah. And then we went on. We went through the Siegfried Line. We had to cross. Oh crap!
You guys crossed the Saar River.
Oh yeah. I think it's the Saar River. There is where I got my Bronze Star.
Do you remember? That day and how you earned that Bronze Star?
Yeah. I
Take me
do.
through that instant.
I do.
Can you tell me about that?
There was one officer, and well, let me get back up a little bit. There was 2 or 3 officers or whoever planned it. We were supposed to cross the river, the division, and this place that we went to, this little town, and we took, I think, if I'm not mistaken, 2 or 3 machine guns. Now this was all volunteer, and we took one Jeep, and we put, I think we had about 3 or 4 machine guns, and I think it's 5 or 6 of us. And we went up there at night with no light or no, and we went a couple of 100 yards out from this little town, and we dug an emplacement and set up these machine guns. And we, as the old saying, all we were doing was creating noise. If we heard anything across the river, we fired on them. And we were forevermore hearing their tanks over there rumbling around, and we'd fire on them. So this one day that I was out there, and I heard a bunch of noise over there, and I heard one of those big tanks, and I was the only one out there. So I just kept firing on them, and finally all the noise just went away. And when I came back in after dark, I told my officer what I'd done, and he wrote all that stuff down, and so I thought that was it, and I guess a couple of months later, I got a call from the CP and they wanted me over there. So that's when I went over there and they gave me a Bronze Star.
So I'm just going to read through your the citation that was written
Okay.
for your Bronze Star. So it says, Paul Bottoms, Private First Class, Coast Artillery Corps, for heroic achievement on the 8th of December 1944 in the vicinity of blank, Germany, during the blank River Operation, which we're saying is the Saar River Operation. It says a platoon became temporarily pinned down by fire from a pillbox. Upon observing this situation, PFC Bottoms commenced firing a machine gun upon the enemy emplacement, and so accurately operated the weapon that all hostile fire was silenced and the platoon was able to continue its advance. His heroic achievement was in accordance with military tradition. Entered military service from Arkansas.
See, the way it was worded, it coincided with what I had just told you.
Mm-hmm.
But they kind of drifted out a little bit here and there, you know. They don't, like I say, they didn't tell you where you were or anything.
Yeah. Because at the time it was still wartime.
Yeah, oh yeah.
So what did you think when you'd received the Bronze Star? How'd that make you feel?
Made me feel good.
Yeah.
The sergeant that was with us, he got a Bronze Star at the same time. But I don't know, it just makes you feel good. Yeah.
Still had to keep on fighting.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So can you just describe to me about what your daily life was like? You know, eating, sleeping, just normal daily conditions.
We were moving up one night, and see, you don't have no lights. The driver better be good. And we had been up for a couple of 3 days, just about no sleep, and I guess I figured, well, we're moving up, so I was sitting back there in that turret, and I fell asleep. And so our half track hit another truck and knocked one of the front wheels completely off of a half track. And here we were pulled over to the side of the road, and I woke up and I said, I remember asking, I said, hey, what's going on? I hear all this talking. And there was one of the officers came up pretty close to where I was, and he asked me, he said, didn't you know you guys had a wreck? I said, no. I said, I guess I was asleep. Hadn't had no sleep for 2 or 3 days, and I just fell off asleep. But it knocked one of the wheels off the front wheel of the half track. And we had to sit there for about 2 or 3 days waiting on repairs. But I just wouldn't sleep. It's a wonder I hadn't got hurt sitting back there in that's a metal cage. Yeah, I was sitting in.
So you'd sleep when you could because it wasn't always guaranteed.
Oh God, yes. Yeah, you slept. You got a wink of sleep whenever you could.
You'd sleep wherever you could, on the ground.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Looking back, what would you say was one of the toughest days or series of days for you while you were overseas?
Oh gosh. Everyone was just about the same thing. You didn't close both eyes at the same time. That's how. No, on a question like that, it'd be hard to answer, you know.
Did you ever think you weren't going to make it back home?
Well, I've told Carolyn 2 or 3 times. I said, just about most that I've talked to, military guys over there in combat, said you might as well figure you're dead. Then just go for whatever you have to do to get closer to home. We lost quite a few guys ourselves.
In your particular unit?
Yeah.
Any that you were particularly close to?
Yeah, there was a guy in Monette, Arkansas. A guy by the name of Howard Reeves. We both went through training together, you know. I went back and see him 2 or 3 times. Yeah. On his war memorial building down here, they got my name up there on the wall, and when we were down there one day, when my Carolyn's daughter was with us, and so I had her to write his name up there under mine.
He was killed in action?
Oh, no, he came back same as I did. Yeah.
But the men that you mentioned, you said you guys lost quite a few men overseas.
Mm-hmm.
Of those guys, were you close to anyone in particular?
No, I wasn't. We didn't. I don't think in my gun crew, I don't think we lost a person.
Because the infantry would take the brunt of the casualties.
Yeah, they got most of them. Yeah, yeah.
Dad, was Tommy Smackover? Was that who you were just talking about? You went and seen him recently, right? In the last 10 years?
There was a guy that he was in my battery, and he was a sergeant, and he was a sergeant of one gun crew. He was from Smackover, Arkansas. And he was, when we were all drafted, he was going to college at Ole Miss. And that's wherever we all called him Smackover Thompson. And he, before, backing up a little bit, it's a little bit of a comedy thing. Before we went overseas, they said, anybody want to take a 10-day leave, put in an application for leave, and write a little note and pin it to it. Why you want this leave? And the best ones will be the first ones that go. So old Smackover, he was quite a joker, and he put in for his leave and wrote a little note. Said, my wife is going to be pregnant, and I'd like to be there when it happens. And they read that note, and they said, anybody have gall enough to write a note like that? He's going to go and leave. So he was one of the first ones to go.
Was that a true statement for him? Or?
Yeah, it was. Okay. He told us what he had wrote on the note.
But yeah, was his wife really pregnant, or?
I don't know.
But he put the right answer down.
Yeah, he put the right answer down.
That's funny. So can you talk to me about your experiences and involvement with the Battle of the Bulge?
Now that's one that, like I told you about, seeing that tank.
Yeah, can you take me through that experience again, just so we have it on record?
We moved up from down south, and it was cold as blue blazes up there. And our commanding officer of our division, I can't think of George Patton, blood and guts. And we moved up, and it was cold, and I happened to see that tank that had been hit, and it looked like the tank commander, he was up on the top, and he was about half hanging out of the opening from the top of the tank. And the I guess it was the driver of the tank. He was about half hanging out. It looked like he was trying to get out. He was on fire. I guess from the tank being on fire, he got hit. And there was 2 or 3 guys out in front of the tank. And they were on the ground, and they were burned bad. And that's about all I remember of being at the Battle of the Bulge. But they said it was a bloody thing.
personal then than it was now. You know, with technology, the way they fight the wars now. I mean, some of the guys in the front lines now see that kind of battle, but back then they knew that's all they had. You know.
Sure. Do you remember pushing through the Siegfried line?
Yeah, but like I'm saying, our outfit, when we were moving up, we didn't fire on nobody unless aerial and ground, you know.
Do you remember what it looked like, the Siegfried line? They had a lot of concrete emplacements.
Yeah, it had a lot of concrete emplacements, and they had a lot of those. You know, the best I can put it is, you know, those things that you put under your house for
Like concrete.
those concrete things. There's
The cinder blocks?
yeah,
Uh-huh.
the square in the bottom, and they come up like this.
Mm-hmm.
It was just loaded with those, but they were big, big, and they had a lot of pillboxes with men with machine guns.
And were those pretty much cleared out by the time that you guys had?
Oh no, we got right in on the. We didn't fire on anything like that. Now, if troops was coming at us, we protected the 105 howitzer.
You guys mainly held a defensive position.
He did shoot some planes down. I don't know where he was at that time. Where were you then, Dad? Where were you when you shot those planes down?
Oh God, I don't remember.
Before that, then?
You're talking about the P-51s or they enemy planes?
No, they were P-51.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they were our pilots.
Yeah, those were the ones that you
Yeah.
talked about earlier.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. So, is it safe to assume that if the enemy approached you guys in your position and they were behind the front lines, if they had made their way to where you guys were
What do you mean?
in your half track, as you said that you guys would fend off enemy riflemen, enemy soldiers coming to try to.
Yeah, if they the Germans, they're patrol, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, if they come in, regardless which way they come from, we would try to take them down if we could.
And if you had to estimate how many instances would that had that happened?
Oh, I don't know.
Was it a pretty frequent occurrence?
No, it wasn't. Not a everyday occurrence. No.
And I know you said your memory, you don't remember a lot during the Battle of the Bulge. Do you remember after?
No, I don't.
That's okay.
And I don't know why.
That's all right. But I understand that you guys were you were on your way to Prague. Um,
Uh, now, I understand we were about 40 miles out of Prague, from Prague, Czechoslovakia,
mhm.
when we were told the war was over.
Do you remember that day?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that was one day we were looking for. Yeah.
And do you remember how you felt when you got that news?
No, I don't. I know it was a happy one.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that area, we got the news that from one of the company, and I don't remember what company it was, of the 90th Division. They said that there were two midwives had got a call to go for this lady who was going to have the baby. And they run on to an officer, one of our officers, and she said, now this was the news that we got, and this book pretty well says just about the same thing. And she said, you know this salt mine up here? There's a big, however put it, the Germans have whatever they stole, there was money and everything in it. And that book shows that one officer or somebody I don't know how he done it, broke through the walls,
Mm-hmm.
and they found all kinds of currency. And that book pretty well tells it all.
So did you remain in Europe for a bit after the war had ended?
Uh, our outfit we were assigned to different companies, units were assigned to different jobs of my outfit was moved into a place in Darmstadt, Germany, a railroad yard, and we were took control of this railroad yard, and we rode trains, ration trains and things out so far and then come back, That was what we did after the war until I got my orders to come home.
And were there any talks about you possibly being sent to the Pacific to help in those efforts?
There was a little chatter. Yeah.
And when did you arrive back home in the States?
Gosh.
Storm is coming in. Storms coming in.
you know, I can't remember. I know that we came in on a ship just out of Newport News, Virginia, and we got into the shore, the base, too late for the ship to come in before dark, and we had to. He dropped anchor. We was a little ways out, and we were out there all night. There was nobody sleeping. Everybody looking at the lights. and so the next day we came in and offloaded. And the first thing they took us to a big mess hall there in Newport News military base. And so the mess sergeant or whoever the workers in there told us, you just go and sit down. There'll be somebody to come and take your order. Order whatever you want. So that's what we did, and then we went to some barracks. We went from there on to what was that place I got discharged from?
Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri.
Yeah, the ones that in that area, they took us to Fort Leonard Wood, and we were there for 3 or 4 days and got discharged.
And then years later, you eventually rejoined the military.
I joined the Navy after I worked for a little while, and I worked for Bell Telephone, and first one thing and another, and I was climbing poles and my back kind of gave out. And that's when I told my father, I said, I'm going to join the Navy. And so if my back gives out, I'll be on the inside looking out. So I spent 17 years in the Navy.
Now, if you had any advice that you could give for my generation and future generations, what would you be able to offer?
And when you get out of high school, if you're not going to go to college, I would say join the military. That is the best. They have a good retirement.
Good career for the family.
I've had 2 or 3 guys to say, "Why did you join the military?" Stay all that time. I said, "Well," I said, "I cry all the way to the bank now." I said, "How are you doing?" It's not a big retirement, but it keeps body and soul together.
Is there anything additional that you'd like to share or offer that we haven't talked about?
No, I don't think so.
He went on to civil service and still worked on planes and stuff.
Yeah, I worked 10 years in civil service before I retired. It took me a long time to retire. It just don't. After you working all those years, it just don't fit to walk out the door. Said I quit. I'm going to go home.
I could imagine it's a tough thing to do.
It is. It is. Yep.
So
I worked at several little petty jobs. But it's hard to quit.
Did you talk about how many places you've seen in the Navy? How many places you've seen around the world in the Navy?
Oh, God. Well, I was just San Diego and Arizona as my main. A lot of people said, "Well, what in the world are you doing over in Phoenix, Arizona, in the Navy? There's no ships over there." No, I was in aircraft. I was an aircraft engine mechanic. So wherever they had aircraft, I worked on them.
So you did in Coronado too?
But I was stationed. That's where I got married.
And how long were you married for?
Well, my wife and I, it was a little funny thing. We were married for about 20 years, and that's when our kids. And in my mind, we separated, divorced, and about 30 years.
Almost.
Yeah. She got married again. I got married again. And it just so happened,
Both of them were renegades that they married.
it just so happened, her husband passed away. And it wasn't long until my wife passed away. So after I hadn't really seen her or talked to her in that 30 years. So one day I called down and you know where
Ridgecrest,
Ridgecrest,
China Lake.
Ridgecrest, California.
I'm familiar. I'm familiar with it.
I lived up there for about all the time I was married between, you know. And my wife passed away, and I called Carolyn. It was sometime after she passed away that I called Carolyn and wanted to know if I could come down, because I knew her and her mother was living together, you know. So I made the call, and she answered the phone. I said, "Is Carolyn there close? Can I talk to her?" And I heard her say, "Carolyn, there's some man wants to talk to you." Carolyn got on the phone and she said, found out it was me. She said, "Mom, you mean you don't remember your ex-husband's voice?" And so I came down, and I don't know, we just, like I say, there was no reference there. We just got close enough and got married again.
That's beautiful. Well, I want to thank you very much for sitting down and
Okay.
speaking with me. And thank you very much for your service.
Okay, thank you.